Wonderful.
So, Maddie, thanks so much for joining us on the webinar series to talk about trailer towing and weights. Can you give us just a brief background of yourself and what you do, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. So my name is Matt Taylor. I've worked my entire adult career in the driver training and the automotive space. So based on what we were seeing in the marketplace is where mobile weigh station came from. We saw a gap in the market, especially in southeast Queensland, for really good quality reporting. And it just facilitates with all my other lines of work. So we do driver training and towing courses. And then this is just another opportunity to feed business within itself, essentially.
Great. All right. So first question for you then, remember guys, you can ask your own questions, is out of all of the vehicles you've weighed, I don't know if you kept account of how many that you have, what percentage have exceeded their one or more limits?
Yeah, so from a figures point of view, if we use percentages, 41% of everybody we've ever weighed are compliant and legal. So only 41%. Non-compliant, it's 59%, but of those, nearly 40% have more than one or more non-compliance issue.
Okay. Yeah. What's the most common non-compliance issue? Because you can be, the thing about towing is there's so many limits you can exceed: front axle, rear axle. I've just talked about that on my YouTube channel, GCM, GVM, towball mass. Which ones are the most commonly exceeded?
It's a pretty even split between gross vehicle mass on the car and aggregate trailer mass on the caravans themselves. Yeah.
Okay, so that means that the vehicle itself is overloaded before you put the trailer on, and it means that the trailer itself is overloaded before, yeah. And of course, if you then put the two together, you're probably in danger of exceeding your gross combination mass, which is the two, right?
Yeah. We rarely actually see the two GVM and ATM being exceeded at the same time. And if you did, you would automatically have GCM over as well. But as far as just picking out through the data, yeah, GVM and ATM are two very, very easy ones to exceed.
Okay. So what do you think people could do if they are going to buy a caravan to avoid sort of seeing numbers in red come up on my calculator or your scales?
Look, I think there needs to be better education. And at the moment, I call it confuse the consumer within the industry, that the terminology it's difficult at the best of times to understand. But on top of that, between all the car manufacturers or the trailer or caravan manufacturers, they're all talking different lingo or jargon. Nothing actually lines up perfectly. So it's very, very easy to get lost in the language. So I would suggest to most people, before you spend a penny, just start sitting on YouTube, jump on your calculators, have a look at as much information as possible, and give us a call. I would much rather have the conversation that's saying, hey, this is going to be a really big, really expensive problem before you've spent the money, because it's a very awkward conversation with a customer where I've got $300,000 worth of caravan and motor vehicle on the scales and everything's illegal.
Okay, so how do you handle that conversation? And because I would imagine, I'm just going to put up some weight definitions here so people can remind them what they are. So just briefly for everyone, some of you will notice there's a limit for the front axle that can't be exceeded. There's a limit for the rear axle, can't exceed that either. The GVM is the maximum the vehicle can weigh by itself. The ATM is the total weight of the trailer, and that's split into GTM, gross trailer mass, which is the weight on the wheels, and towball mass, which is the weight on the tow bar. And everything combined is the GCM, or gross combination mass. So, okay, so Matt, how do you, someone's come onto the scales, everything has looked, exceeded one or more limits. How do you have that conversation? Because it's bloody painful, isn't it?
It was probably the biggest shock when we started the business was trying to understand how to deliver this information, I guess, in a constructive way. you get pretty good at knowing what's going to be illegal before you see it actually drive up onto the scales. When they drive into the car park, you're going to have a pretty good guesstimation of what that type of car is, what it's capable of. You can see how it's sitting. Again, it just depends on what part of the equation is illegal or non-compliant. Most people with the dual cab utes, if they've exceeded gross combination mass, there's just no choice. They've got to lose the weight because it's virtually impossible on a already registered vehicle to have those modifications changed to upgrade the GCM. Very fortunately, though, if we see GVM or ATM as an issue or anything associated with it, well, we've got engineering partners, and if the engineering on the vehicle or the trailer is appropriate, well, then we're just going to refer them to those engineering partners of ours to get the vehicle compliant, not necessarily lose all of the weight.
Okay, so what can be done realistically to lose weight?
Well, this is the hard thing, is that some people have pre-committed on the sheer amount of accessories on the vehicle to begin with. It doesn't take much. If I was to pick on the 7-seat wagons for a minute, and that's anything from the 4-cylinder ones like a MUX all the way up to a V8 Land Cruiser, just seven-seater wagons in general, you've only typically got 625 to 650 kilos of payload. So if you've got 300 kilos sitting on the back as towball weight, you're going to be very limited. By the time you put the family in and a couple pieces of luggage, virtually the car would need to remain standard to achieve that goal.
Yeah, okay. So it's pretty hard to take out a lot of weight from cars. What we're saying is get it right beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and look, this is a little saying that we've coined up at our driver training courses, but I guess one of the main ones is the idea of caravanning and camping is to get away from it all. So don't take it all with you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think that the aftermarket tries to sell you a bit of everything and heavy everything. For those interested, I've put a video together where I use my hiking gear as four-wheel drive camping gear, and I save 110 kilograms over a family of 4 by using things like hiking stoves and hiking mats, etc. And it's more expensive, but then again, it's, you've got to look at the cost of doing a GVM upgrade or whatever else there, and it's also significantly less bulky as well because it's just less space. So you sort of get this vicious circle. But yeah, I definitely see that being a problem. Now, we were talking before the webinar started about the discrepancy between what caravans curb weight, which is the unladen weight, is plated at, and versus what it actually is, and discussing some of the things which seem to be added after the caravan is weighed. So do you want to talk a bit about that? We talked about weighing the caravan and then putting the mattress in, for example.
So I think the first thing to clarify is that tear weight typically on a car is a very documented figure. It's basically a vehicle with operating fluids and then 10 litres of fuel, no occupants, no accessories fitted. Tear weight on a caravan is very ambiguous. What it should be is, in my mind, a finished trailer, caravan, the day the customer goes to pick it up. Yep. Granted, it could have empty water tanks. Granted, it could have empty gas bottles. But what we're actually seeing is that this tear weight is massively unachievable in the real world. We've tried to reverse engineer vans to achieve this tear weight on the scales, and we've had to pull the curtains off, the mattresses out. It just gets silly. So the idea of a tear weight, once being designed or designated at the start of a production run, and then the caravans change in design or something alters over that time period, of course, then the tear weight will change as well.
Yeah, I'd like to see the same. I'd actually like to go further and fill all of the water tanks, not the grey tanks, because I think it's ludicrous for a caravan manufacturer to say, oh, well, look, we don't know if you're going to fill the water tanks or not. Well, what the hell did you buy the water tanks for? If you've got 200 litres of water on board, you're going to go, oh, no, I'll only put 50 litres in. What sort of craziness is this? And similarly, if it's got provision for two 12 kilogram gas bottles, surely you're going to put 2 in there. So I put the gas bottles in, put the water in, put the mattress in, put some bedding in, put the number plate on the back, fill the toilet cassette with fluid, etc., and then it's ready. So then the only thing which you're adding is cutlery, clothes, etc.
Yes.
That's kind of your base.
Yep. And I think too, then on that note, with full water tanks, we're seeing a real split amongst the manufacturers. Some will say our van's designed to have an empty water tank, which is useless to most Australian travellers, because then you can't have the ability to pick up a bush camp along the way. But then other caravan manufacturers are stressing to the extreme ends, to achieve correct ball weight, to lower the centre of gravity, our vans must be loaded with a full water tank.
Yeah, I think that's utterly stupid both ways. I really do. The caravan should tow with the water tanks completely empty and completely full, and any combination in between, and a grey water tank. If it isn't, I mean, what are you going to do? Just sort of go to your caravan park with empty tanks and fill it, and then when you leave, you just drop the water. I mean, what sort of madness is this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that should be in a code of conduct as well. In fact, if the journalist industry ever could do realistic caravan tests, which we can't, then I'd like to be able to do that towing with water tanks in all different configurations. But sadly, I don't think we're ever going to be able to do realistic caravan tests.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah, and true, solar panels, etc. Okay, question from Neil Copeland. Do you think towing courses should be mandatory before towing a caravan?
100%. If we look at where you can be on a standard road license, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can potentially drive up to 8.5 ton as a combination of passenger car and trailer on the back. Yeah, but a light rigid truck license goes up to about 8 ton. So if the configuration changed and you're in a light truck, you'd need a license for that. But it's okay to be heavier as a four-wheel drive and caravan. Absolutely, it should be a provision added to a standard motoring license. The age-old question, though, is that it comes down to who should pay for it. Ultimately, the consumer goes, well, the government wants us to be safer, so they should chip in for it. The government says, well, if you want to look after your own best interests, you should pay for it. I think at the moment, there's that many really, really good operators out there across Australia already offering driver training courses. So if you want to improve yourself, just bite the bullet, spend the money. I like to think of it as very cheap insurance for you and your partner and your whole family on the road.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. The UK did have a basic towing course, but they actually just got rid of it because they were short of drivers for heavy vehicles. But yeah, the thing is, you can drive a vehicle up to 4.5 tons GVM on a car license, yet you can drive up to probably seven tons plus GCM, which is well above that. And let's face it, the complexity in towing 7 tons or even 5 tons is well beyond driving a 4.5 ton truck. Because here's the thing, where are people meant to get the knowledge? Even connecting a car to a trailer, if you've never done it before, there's all of these chains and levers and things. How do you do it? And then legal, and also the stupidity we've got with road laws across states. I mean, New South Wales have got 1 speed limit for trailers, Victoria got another one. It's just weird and wonderful all over the place, let alone reversing and dealing with sway. So yeah, I'm in complete agreement there should be a towing course, but the caravan industry is by and large against it. And the reason they're against it because they don't want to get anything in the way between a retired couple walking in with the best part of 100k ready to spend, and putting barriers in there like driver training is going to decrease their sales in their view, so they don't want to know about it. So to my mind, they're sort of discharging their duty of care. In fact, it's interesting, one of my readers said, am I going to be speaking at the caravan show? And I said, I think the caravan industry wants me as far away as possible from their show, but yeah.
Look, I will say on the flip side though, Robert, because it's one of the projects of ours that we did get off the ground, but there is a car manufacturer out there fully supporting towing courses, and it's wonderful to see. We've been delivering this program for that brand now for a couple of years, and we've put well well over a couple of hundred people through the course. So there are some manufacturers, albeit this time as a car manufacturer, putting their money where their mouth is and backing their products.
Yeah, well, you're happy for you to name them.
Look, of course, that's Isuzu Ute Australia. So part of their iVenture Club, which is their customer engagement program. We've been doing part of their four-wheel drive training courses as well, but we got off the ground for them a dedicated towing course, and we've been running that nationally as best as we can with COVID.
Yeah, so aside from his other talents, Matt also works with Isuzu Ute running that course, so he does have an interest in it. But I am aware of that course and I do support it, so I'm happy for it to be promoted here. And there's a number of places which will do good towing training for you. Get About, I work with them as well. Yep. On occasion, so you can do it, but the problem is that the average person doesn't realize those courses exist or anything else like that. And why would they, if they've had no interest in cars up until the point they've cashed in their super and ready for the spending kids inheritance lap? Yeah,
that's it. Yep.
Okay, so some questions. Do many crashes get insurance knocked back due to being overloaded? Have you seen that happen?
Yeah, we have. There's a few more elements to that now. I won't go into the gory details, but a couple of years ago, there was a crash in New South Wales. The trailer was dramatically over its ATM, and the driver was fully aware of it. After they had a pretty horrific crash, before applying any first aid to any of the occupants in his car, other dash cam footage basically showed this person draining the water tanks before emergency services arrived. So that set off a catalyst reaction to future prosecutions. So if there is a serious accident, I call them crashes, they're not really accidents, but if there's a serious crash and there's any hint of suggestion that the van's overloaded, they'll reverse engineer the crash. You and I both know John very well from Get About. He's in fact part of many of these crash investigations. So the insurance payout is going to be the least of your problems at the moment, because they are actually looking at prosecuting people. It's real jail time if something very bad goes wrong. Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with that, apart from the fact that I'm only a fan of enforcing laws if there's been proper education. Yeah. And what pains me is someone getting into that situation and just not knowing. And it's all very well to go, oh, people should know this, that, and the other. But the people saying that tend to have a background in cars and growing up with stuff and know things, whereas a lot of people don't, which is the pain. So
yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. I think absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So question from Andrew Surety saying, trying to find a suitable tow vehicle is difficult. He needs to tow a 3,500 kilogram boat and take a few people plus gear in the car. Any suggestions? Well, if the boat's 3,500 and you want to take a few people, then you, my friend, are looking at something like a Canter or an Isuzu NPS or one of the big American utes, but a big American ute with payloads like the Ram 3,500, not the 2,500, because you won't find something like a 200 series can take a few people plus gear plus 3,500.
No, I can tell you the numbers right now. I've just worked it out in a calculator. So if we have a look at a typical Land Cruiser, and I'll just focus on the 200 for the word get-go, but it does only leave you in its standard trim just a couple of 100 kilos of actual payload within the vehicle. So I think your average family of four is approximately 220 kilos according to CASA. So you can do the numbers there that you're going to run out of space very quickly. The 3.5 ton towing isn't a myth. There's just lots of conditions that go with it to make it happen. Yep. If you want more payload in the car or more gear, what you need to do is consider the boat becoming lighter, put in a GVM on the Land Cruiser, and shifting that weight forward, basically.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Now, question: why don't Isuzu use advertised vehicles towing using towing?
Probably a fairly deeper question than what I'm probably allowed to answer. I'm a contractor, so I help with these commercials. I guess one of the couple of aspects to it is all of these commercials that you've ever seen on TV, we're always shooting them with proper closed roads. There's police escorts, so we don't tend to have to, as the vehicle is actually unregistered as well. So There's nothing mandating us in the shop to do it, but I do know the brand is actually actively looking at fixing these concerns that we're hearing from the public and from the consumers. And I've just done some homework for the brand about the next shoot and worked out that this is what the mirrors, the tow bar, the family, the luggage, what it's going to weigh, and we will have a perfectly appropriate towing device on the back.
Yeah, I can probably speak on that a bit wider. All of these shoots are generally coordinated by people who don't have much of a background in cars and towing, and they don't necessarily have someone like a Matt Taylor on hand to advise them. If they do, they don't necessarily listen, and they want everything to look good, so they don't want to put towing mirrors, whatever else, on the car, and they don't think about loading the roof rack, stuff like that. So I agree that needs to be called out, and if anyone does see anything like this, feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to write to the manufacturer and say, hey, do you realize that caravan's actually wider than the tow car and you should have towing mirrors on it, or you've got 7 people in this car plus clearly 50 kilos on the roof and you're towing something you claim to be 4 tons or whatever, right? So feel free to contact me, and I will quite happily call it out, because someone just wrote monkey see, monkey do. I agree. I mean, it should be setting a standard, even if it's in a closed environment of the police escort. Even if you're legally allowed to do it, it's just setting the right example, in my view.
Yeah, and look, there's always some very other interesting, I guess, conditions behind the scenes that maybe the average person hasn't taken into account. The fact that the latest NUX campaign, when we shot all those commercials, the vehicles we were using were in Australia 6 months before any accessory was ever designed for it. So we just don't have the luxury of fitting up something that doesn't exist at that point.
Well, that's true, but towing mirrors general purpose. So yes, I take your point generally about accessories. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions, guys? Because we've run out of questions, so that means I get to ask some of my own. So. Do you generally find that, I guess, utes are more heavily overloaded than wagons, or is there sort of a pattern there or not?
I guess the pattern is the utes are going to typically trip up on GCM,
right,
and the wagons will trip up on GVM first.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, if we just use rough numbers, and I'm not picking on any brand here or anything like that, if we just use really round numbers, let's say you've got a dual cab ute, you've got a GVM of 3 ton, and it's allowed to tow 3.5 ton.
Yeah.
There's a reasonably fair and logical assumption that 3 ton plus 3.5 should equal 6.5. But in reality, most dual cab utes are capped at 6 ton in their GCM. So that's where they will come undone, in the sense that they've loaded both up to their maximums, but they're going to be 500 kilos over on the GCM rating. So if you want to have the full 3.5 ton trailer on the back of a ute, you need to typically lose anywhere from 5 up to 700 kilos in the car, which is very difficult. Yeah,
and ironically, the lighter you make the tow car, the less stable it is, because
absolutely.
And if you look at my model where I've got the Get About model on a treadmill, that really shows it very clearly. The heavier the tow car relative to the trailer, the better. And please, can nobody say, oh, what about prime movers towing articulated? Because that's completely different dynamic.
It's a semi-trailer wheel design. It's a 5th axle arrangement. They are chalk and cheese. But at the same time too, like if we do want to compare trailers, I'll be one to say that I sort of believe now that caravans, based on the pig trailer axle arrangement, they have gotten too big, too heavy, and too long for that unstable platform that they're based off. Yeah, completely agree. And you've got too heavy spare wheels at the back, particularly with the off-road caravans, which are lifted, and then they're on mud tires. Why do they fit mud tires? It's just pointless. And then you've got tire squirm on those tires. Then the mud tires would work probably great in mud, but realistically, I'd give up a bit of that for it to grip better on bitumen, particularly in the wet round a country road. But the tyre on the trailer isn't driving, so there's
I
no
know,
need for
right?
that
I mean,
level of traction
yeah,
anyways.
yeah. And if it's a single axle, then it's always going to be in contact with the ground because it's a triangle pivot. So it's not as if it's going to, you know, have much. Yeah, it's a bit crazy there.
Look, the modern style of caravan, dare I say it, is causing a lot of headaches. We can still have customers, and we're 41% of our customers are legal when they come to us. But when we put it up on the scales and I see the numbers, because we do a proper corner weight balance report like you'd expect on a race car.
Yeah.
When I see it on the corner weight report, I can instantly just assume to the customer, so it mustn't tow very nice after 85 kilometers an hour. And they often replies, well, how did you know? Because I can see it in the imbalance, not an overweight, but an imbalance on the scales.
Yeah, exactly. And I just got to stress that again. It's not total weight so much, it's the weight distribution. If you've got a lot of weight heavy at the front of the drawbar and a lot of weight balancing it right at the back, then even if your towball mass is whatever you think is perfect, it's going to be an unstable trailer, both in pitching like that and yawing like that. And by the way, can we now just explode the myth that the 10% towball mass is something you should always aim for, because that number has no basis whatsoever in science or logic or evidence or testing. I don't know where it came from. It just was made up by someone that's been repeated like a mantra. Oh, you got to increase towball mass till it gets to 10%. No, you don't. So my personal van, it's 2300. I tow it around at 6% and it tows great. Absolutely. Because I've just made sure just to keep the weight as central as I possibly can.
Yep. And my biggest focus is worried about weight at the rear of the van before we get too nitpicky with weight on the nose. You know, if you look at the current standard layout of these new big off-road vans, almost all of them have a full width ensuite at the rear.
Yeah.
If you look into how those vans are actually constructed, the ensuite gets dropped in via a crane onto the chassis. It's a one piece up to 500 kilos. So you've got this huge mass sitting at the most rearward part of the van, plus the bash bar, plus 2 mud terrain tyres off the back. That's a far bigger problem than someone's ball weight being 6% or 16%.
Yeah, agreed, totally. Now, look, in fairness, it is difficult to design a caravan to have all the weight centrally located. I mean, I know when I tow a car on a trailer, it's a way better tow weight for weight in a caravan, because you can put the car on a trailer and also move it backwards and forwards very easily, and you don't have that massive side. I just did a session on caravan aerodynamics last week, and we talked a lot about the effect on the slab side of aero there as well.
Yeah,
okay.
I guess a big difference too, comparing your car trailer to where most of the off-road vans are, is the suspension design. And not really many people are talking about the fact that the independent new generation suspensions on the van is causing a lot of trailer instability as well.
Yeah, I don't think we should have independent suspension on it's actually can be less stable than live axle. I'm going to do something more on that point there, but yeah, to do with the way that when the vehicle rolls center of gravity is what the roll center is what we're talking about here. But look, that's a highly technical topic.
Oh,
yeah. We'll get into that another time. Okay, question from Bernard. So the towball mass reduces weight on the front axle. Yes, indeed it does. So I've done a whole video on this. So when you put 300 kilograms of towball mass onto your towball, you actually increase the weight on the rear axle by maybe 400, 450 kilograms and off the front axle. Is there an objective measure of where a certain percentage of downforce becomes dangerous?
Look, we calculate it on our reports. So when I look at the corner weight report, we've got a little section called TBM to vehicle RGAM, so rear gross axle mass, and we work it out as a multiplication rate. So you get a percentage. So if it's reading 160%, and then it actually spits out what that towball mass is reading to the rear axle. So I've got a van here on the report. It's about 300 kilos, but it's reading 480 kilos to the rear gross axle mass. I typically would say anything higher than 150% is going to cause issues.
Yeah.
The cars that will automatically have this higher number will always be dual cabs, and then dual cabs with canopies, and then an extended tongue, because it's just adding more and more length it's adding more and more leverage to the equation.
Yeah. So extended tow bar hitches, bad news.
They cause trailer sway as well. We can go into the advanced physics of when a vehicle turns sharp to the left. The longer the tow tongue hangs out is actually the more it's turning the trailer to the right instantaneously.
Yep, exactly. And then you've got the leverage effect, and you've got chassis stress. Just no. So do not extend your tow bar. If you look on my website, I've got an example of one which I found, and that's extended by about 1/2 meter, maybe 300 mil, and that's significant extra stress on the chassis and increasing the rear axle load as well. So please don't do that. Okay, question from Neil Copeland. Is it for sidewall strength? So this comes back to the point about mud tyres. Is it for sidewall strength? No, it's not, because if you want a strong sidewall, you have a light truck construction tyre.
All-terrain tyre.
Yeah. And the construction of a tyre is irrespective of the tread pattern. So you can, I have seen them, there are passenger construction mud tyres. Don't know why I'd want one, but they do exist. Similarly, you can have a light truck construction tyre which has got road pattern. So I think we want at best an all-terrain, because frankly you don't need mud terrain grip on a heavy caravan. Where the hell are you going to go that you need it? It's just the looks, right? And what it does, it just increases noise, it increases fuel consumption, and it reduces grip in the dry, and particularly in the wet. So I don't like it.
And on top of that too, folks, you'll see if you had two identical all-terrain tyres, one being the light truck construction and one being the standard passenger car, the light truck tyre will also come with a much higher load index rating as well. So that's where you're actually going to see the strength being measured in the sidewall of the tyre.
Yeah, exactly. So, excellent point. So just look at the load rating of the tyre, and don't think that mud tyres are just necessarily tougher. It's the construction of the tyre which is most important. Yeah. Okay, cool. Next one. Does the weight of a heavy hitch for a weight distribution hitch have to come off your TBM limit?
No, it's being carried by the car.
Yeah. Okay,
but the bars are being carried by mostly the nose of the caravan. So typically there's about an extra 30 kilos goes into having a weight distribution hitch anyways. And we probably see 90% of the customers that come to us with a weight distribution hitch, we see on the scales it was unnecessary, and as I said, 90% end up removing them entirely once they're finished with the scales.
So a few points about weight distribution hitch. Don't use one unless you really have to. Because it is extra weight, it is extra hassle, etc. Not all vehicles can take them. Some manufacturers say do not use them. So that's the other point there. And remember, it will actually add weight not only to the front wheels but also to the wheels on the caravan as well. And it creates a lot of extra stress there. So no.
I guess one of the most important statistics when it comes to weight distribution hitches now, and we've seen this through the insurance crash data, that over 60% of high-speed trailer sway write-offs, they've had weight distribution hitches fitted. So my concern with weight distribution hitches is that someone's tried to put a Band-Aid on something that needed stitches.
I totally agree. Yeah, look, I think you should set your rig up so you don't need anti-sway, you don't need any of that, and have electronic anti-sway systems. I do have a video explaining how that works on cars and on trailers, so I have that, but that's kind of a backup device. So yeah, only use that one. We've got a cracker of a question now. Thoughts on nitrogen filled caravan tires? Easy. No.
I'll save you $5 a tire, don't worry about it.
Absolutely not. No, look, the only time you want to use nitrogen is if you've got a really high performance race car, right? And the reason that comes in is because race car tires, I'm talking not just any race car, really high performance cars here, they get their tire temperatures up to above the boiling point of water, and water boils and it causes problems, etc. So they use nitrogen, so that doesn't happen. Anyone who's doing amateur racing or track days or something like me, we just use air, which is 85% nitrogen, and it's nuts. It's just a waste of time. Yeah.
I think from a molecular point of view, oxygen's like 2.16 atoms wide, and nitrogen's 2.36. So the permeation effect is almost identical.
Yeah, there's all sorts of claims about nitrogen in tyres, but really they're all to do with just keeping the correct pressure in your tyres. So unless, and the other thing is even getting the air into nitrogen into the tyre, how are you going to get the air out and you need 2 valve caps. So now, look, if you've got spare money, support me on Patreon, don't spend it on nitrogen. That's so much, or go and get yourself away with Matt. No, that's a cracker of one, yeah. Okay, next question. Oh yeah, back to Bernard. My question was on steering control being affected by less weight on the downwheel. So let's talk about that, Matt. So you've got a really heavy towball mass. What does that do to your steering effect when the vehicle's braking and accelerating?
Yeah, so you can certainly, once we see that figure of about 150% on the rear gross axle mass, you're simply robbing the front axle of its weight. And the reality is, dynamically for a car, weight does equal grip. So the front tyres need grip to steer, they need grip to brake, especially under evasive or duress situations. This will start to rear its head. However, the asterisk to that is why I was saying about weight distribution, hitches causing more crashes than preventing, is because they've actually robbed the rear axle of too much weight, and it's the rear axle of the car becoming unstuck. So it's just a balancing act. There's no perfect solution. Every configuration is different, and that's why we're just thoroughly going to recommend you get your combination weighed, and we fine tune the best balance in the setup.
Yeah, now you can tell that Matt's a great guy to talk to about this, because he's talking the language of race cars there with weight shift and dynamics and things like that. And it's really applicable to what happens on towing as well. So as you brake, you get a weight shift sort of like that, pitches forwards, and you get an increased weight over the front axle, which is good. And as Matt said, the more weight you put on an axle, the more grip you get. And that's what normally happens with a car. But when a car is towing, you also get this pitching movement from the trailer as well, and you get increased down towball mass when you brake, because the trailer is pitching forwards, because the center of gravity is ahead of the axle there. So you're actually getting an up force on the front axle as well as a bit of a downforce there, so you don't really get the extra weight on the front axle, which allows you to steer that you normally would when you're braking. So this is just yet another bit of towing dynamics you don't normally find taught on courses there, but it's important to know. So the greater the towball mass you've got there, the worse that effect is. And if you're trying to brake, you might find that your front wheels lock up, because oh God, this could get complicated. Talk for the next 2 hours, but basically when a car brakes, because most of the weight goes over the front wheels, the brake bias is set to do more braking on the front wheels than the rear wheels. And therefore, if all of a sudden you've got less weight on the front wheels, you have to lock the front wheels. When you lock the front wheels, you can't steer. This is probably the point where we need to do a demonstration, but yeah.
And then on top of that as well, as you would know from electronics in the car, you've also got brakeforce distribution, which is actually relying on the rear suspension coming down in ride height to work appropriately. So if you've got a device effectively cheating this ride height, then the brakeforce distribution is actually going to apply brakeforce incorrectly.
Oh, that's such a good point. So I don't know if everyone got that, but basically, looking at this, the car has got sensors about it. It's about the suspension compression, etc., ride height. When it doesn't happen, it doesn't distribute brakes front and rear. Now, brake force distribution is on pretty much all cars in the last several years. We used to have just plain ABS, and now what brake distribute? So ABS just stops a wheel locking. That's what it does. Brake force distribution distributes the braking force around the 4 wheels for maximum effect, and it's really effective, provided the electronics aren't tricked into thinking the wrong thing. So I think everyone's going to end up selling their caravan at the end of this.
No, we don't want that.
No, we don't want that. Look, the thing is, it can be done safely, and you guys are all here getting good information, so that's a good start. So get yourself weighed, get yourself trained, and then you too can tour Australia nice and safely, just knowing, like any vehicle, it's knowing about driving to what the vehicle is capable of and understanding how it works. Because for me, whether you're driving a full drive, a tow car, a race car, whatever else, if you understand how the vehicle works, you're going to be a safer driver automatically. Then you can pick from your list of driving techniques which ones you're going to use at the appropriate time. Rear airbags. Do you want to make any comment on rear airbags, Matt?
Look, depending on the application, they certainly have, they're a warranted item in my mind. We just need to be very careful on what type of cars they're getting installed to. Am I wanting to put airbags into a leaf-sprung dual cab ute? Absolutely not. No, because the engineering on the chassis, you're not going to find that vehicle would be warranted by the manufacturer. So that's a big question mark on a new car. I wouldn't want to place on it. But let's say we've got a 7-seater ute-based wagon, so like an MUX or a Pajero Sport or something along those lines. And if it's just a weekender, you know, a couple of trips a year, you're going away with the family caravanning, it would be perfect to have airbags in the rear of that car because you get to keep the standard suspension, comfortable, soft riding springs around town. But when you do need the extra load capacity and that self-leveling effect, just bump the airbags up and away you go.
Yeah, because remember that the suspension on a stock four-wheel drive is not designed to carry a constant load of 200-300 kilograms, which is typically what you do when you accessorize it. Nor is it it's a compromise between driving around town with one person in it and fully loaded and towing. So changing the suspension to something more oriented to your specific needs is not a bad idea at all. But please don't think that changing the suspension alone suddenly gives you more towing capacity. It doesn't. You will need to re-rate the vehicle. Now, GVM upgrades are a re-rating, I like to say, rather than upgrade. And a GVM upgrade doesn't necessarily mean you can tow more. It might do. Won't change the maximum tow brake capacity, but depending on the load on the car, you might be able to tow a bigger trailer. But yeah, I've got a video on that as well. Okay, so we're going for 40 odd minutes then. I think we will bring it to a close here. So Matt, thank you very much indeed. It's been amazing to talk to you and get some of your insights there, mix your various motoring experience and bring some of that expertise to towing. That's fantastic the way that you do that.
No, thank you very much for having me. And by all means, if we can just help more people be safer on the roads, well then that's what we're in it for. We started off as what would be a service provider industry, but we've very much gravitated towards an education business nowadays.
Great. Well, thanks so much for attending, guys. The recording will be on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe, etc. And see you in the next webinar. Thanks all.
Thanks very much.
Bye.